Welcome to the CS Week Marketplace webinar series. CS Week Marketplace offers fresh perspectives and strategies presented monthly by knowledge specialists from the Conference 39 Platinum and Gold sponsors. I'm Lisa Collins with CS Week, your moderator today, along with Roxanne Hicyilmaz with Opower, who will facilitate your question and answer session. Mark your calendars for CS Week and Conference 40, which will be held April 25th to 29th, 2016, at the Phoenix Convention Center in Phoenix, Arizona. Watch your email and our social media channels for registration information. This program will be recorded and available for playback along with our other archive presentations later this afternoon. You will find it by clicking on the webinars icon from our homepage, then clicking through the CS Week Marketplace icon. Attendees are encouraged to upload questions to the Q&A panel as they arise. However, all questions will be held until after the presentation for the Q&A segment. Please ensure that you address your questions to all panelists so that we may see them. Today's webinar is Moments That Matter, the Billing Experience from the Customer Perspective, presented by Timur Hicyilmaz and Michael Staples with Opower. Timur is the Director of Product Research for Opower. He leads a team of researchers tasked with knowing how consumers around the world manage and think about energy consumption. This team measures and explores consumer priorities and sentiment on a wide range of energy-related topics and works to incorporate lessons learned into the Opower product. Prior to joining Opower, Timur spent 12 years at CEB, where he managed the quantitative research practice aimed at heads of marketing and sales. Timur resides in Washington, D.C., and is a graduate of Harvard. Michael Staples manages marketing and strategy for customer care products at Opower. In this role, Michael works with leading utilities around the world to apply Opower's technology platform to pioneer new customer experiences that result in happier customers and lower service cost. Michael previously led marketing and strategy for Opower's commercial energy efficiency and engagement products. Before joining Opower, Michael worked at MarketBridge, where he consulted on go-to-market strategy for Fortune 500 technology and financial services companies. Michael has a BS from the McIntire School of Commerce at the University of Virginia. Welcome, Timur and Michael.
Thank you, Lisa. It's, for the introductions. So first, some background. As everybody on the call is aware, the utility industry is going through a lot of change. Customer expectations are on the rise. Utility service is increasingly being compared to consumer goods companies such as Amazon, Netflix, and to Uber. And people are used to being served by banks and cell phone companies, with consumers increasingly demanding easy, effortless service. This research is part of a larger research project where we set out to understand the state of the utility-customer relationship here in the US and across the world. For this, we collected data from a variety of sources. We started with executive interviews with our utility customers. We spoke with them to get their top-down perspective and augmented this by analyzing call center data from 15-plus utilities to find out why customers call their utility. We then took these findings, gave them structure, and conducted a large-scale global survey to validate our findings and to learn a little bit about how things differ across the world. Our conclusion, and to cut a long story very short, it turns out there are 12 natural moments that define the customer experience, and that these provide a unique opportunity to engage with the energy customer. These are moments when customers are thinking about their utility. They range from moving into a new home, a change in rates, receipt of a new smart meter, or even experiencing an outage. As you will have noticed, these moments are based on actual customer journey. They are not reverse, they do not require the invention of a new moment. We could talk in depth about any one of these, but today I want to talk about the billing experience, one of the most important moments there is. As you might imagine, the bill is one of the single most important communications that a utility customer receives. We know from Accenture that customers think about their utility for about 9 minutes every year. And as it happens, a lot of that thought is probably happening around the point when they receive their bill. So, for example, almost 80% of people report reading their bill when it arrives. Similarly, when we have sent consumers e-bill notifications, these are among some of the most frequently opened and read communications that we have. But we also know from asking people to narrate their bill that consumers process their bill at a fairly superficial level. They look at the amount due and want to know when it's due, but they'd be hard-pressed to explain their rate, for example. In its current form, the average utility bill is a very technical document, crammed full of information that only a minority of consumers digest. You see some of this in terms of when we asked consumers about their expectations. Here, we did some gap analysis. We asked them for how important different services are to the utility customer, and then asked them to indicate how satisfied they are. The ones with the largest gap in terms of how important something was to a customer and how satisfied they were are all related to the billing experience. This further underlines the importance of the billing moment and asks us and led to some questions. So what's going on here? What can we do to address these gaps? This then led to further research, where we supplemented our initial Moments That Matter research with a deep dive into the billing moment. Specifically, we acquired some third-party data, some very, very large surveys of consumers across the U.S. To identify more precisely what's happening at this moment and to get consumer perceptions. And we supplemented this with a lot of internal Opower research. This involved a lot of qualitative research, interviews, and focus groups, as well as online experiments and surveys. Among other things, for example, members of the research team intercepted consumers, gave them envelopes to open, and we filmed them opening the envelope to find out how exactly they orient the letter and what exactly they look at. This in-depth work allowed us to put together a straw model for what the utility journey might look like. As it happens, we think you can usefully break this out into three parts. There's the bill arrival. So when the customer opens the bill, how do they process it? There's assessment. So once they see the bill, how do they decide what it means to them? So for example, how does somebody decide that the bill is high versus normal? And then third is action. What happens once the customer has opened the letter and read the bill? Typically, we find people pay their bill and move on, but not always. And it was especially interesting to us to find out what happens at those moments. So let's start with arrival. How do customer expectations impact the bill arrival specifically? First, when we did user testing and we gave people bills to open and asked us to walk them through the bills, we find a couple of things. First, they focus on the amount that is owed. It's a very transactional experience. Perhaps that's not surprising. Second, as I already alluded to, people don't have a good grasp of the rest of the bill. They struggle to make sense of some of the other information they've been given. And so they have a gut reaction that's based on the dollar amount that they see. And interestingly, a surprisingly large number of these people experience bill shock. So about 40% of the people we surveyed reported receiving a high bill in the last 12 moments. And the majority of these also report feeling made anxious and being surprised by the bill. Bill shock, in other words, is a very real thing. And we think that a lot of the dissatisfaction with the billing experience stems from this moment of shock. It also speaks to the fact that most consumers don't have a great handle on their energy consumption, which means that they are repeatedly shocked if the bill is more than they thought it should be. It is, in general, hard for them to understand why their bill goes up and down. For one thing, we've learned people increasingly expect a bit of a heads-up notice about high bill notifications. So here, for example, on the slide, you'll see a picture of a recent focus group we conducted in the Northeast, and which is entirely typical of focus groups we've conducted around the country. But at focus groups, typically a consumer will invariably reinvent the idea of a high bill notification. Here, the guy in the top right-hand corner of the screen, for example, told us a little bit about his experience with Verizon, how they sent him texts saying that this is where he is at the usage period, and that he would have loved it if a utility would do a similar thing for him. That would at a minimum give him a heads up in terms of where the bill was trending, and if it happened early enough, it might even give him some time to change consumption. And this too is part of rising expectations, as consumers are used to receiving these kinds of notifications from all manner of other providers. Beyond arrival, we were then interested in finding out, so what happens? The consumer receives the bill, they have a gut reaction to the dollar amount. How do they then assess what they're going to do about this bill, or whether or not they should even react to it? And so we did extensive research with different consumers to find out how exactly they determine what is a high bill and what isn't. Three broad themes emerged from this research. It turns out people take basically one of three strategies to decide whether or not something's a high bill. First, some more data-savvy folks take a couple of things into account. They have a sense of what their past bills were. They have a sense for what the weather was, so they calibrate their expectations based onto that. Others have a fixed amount in mind. Anything above a certain amount is considered a high bill, irrespective of external conditions. And then a third approach is people have percentage thresholds in mind, so they think of it in terms of a percentage bill, of a percentage. And this is where we wanted to introduce a little bit of interactivity and ask you, which one of these three strategies do you think was most prominent? Which one of these would allow us to best predict how a high bill is determined? And so Lisa is now going to give you a polling question. And so please just choose one of those, and we'll wait for maybe a little bit longer. Hopefully that was enough time for everybody. And waiting for the results. Well, that was interesting. Turns out most of you thought that people were a little bit more data savvy, looking at option 1 there. Here's where I should also confess this was a little bit of a trick question. It turns out that there really is no single right answer across a group of people. How exactly people decide what's a high bill or not is really fairly idiosyncratic and depends on the person. And that this means that you need to be prepared to deliver information in a remarkably personalized way, and that this is going to depend a lot on individual customer preference. As it happens, for what it's worth, for the population in general, the winning amount is actually a fixed amount. It speaks a little bit to how people budget in absolute amounts rather than relative amounts, which makes sense if you think about your average household bill. Other industries, for example, are remarkably good at giving people the same kind of information in different ways. So here, for example, from Amazon, assuming you wanted to buy some body wash, you'll see 3 types of information that's been given to 3 types of people, behavioral science tell us. So assessors, for example, these are the people who simply want to evaluate something very deep. They want a lot of information. And for them, Amazon gives you these ratings. Here, if you so want, you can deep dive into the ratings for this body wash and learn more about it than you ever wanted to. On the other hand, for locomotors, people who just simply want to accomplish a task and move on, well, for them, Amazon provides you with a one-click button. You don't have to think too much about it, a simple click, and the body wash is on its way. And then third, for the maximizers, these are people who really want deals, who really want to save, and who want to make the most of every single opportunity. Amazon offers you a deal there in the gray box. In particular, it's a subscription service. If you commit to subscribing, Amazon will send you that body wash at something of a discount. The other thing we learned when it comes to high bill is that a lot of it depends on income, so it's not nearly as clear-cut as you might think. So here, we're showing you the entire data set where we ask them to tell us what constitutes a high bill in dollar bands, and it's broken out by 3 income bands. So it's under 50,000, 50 to 100,000, over 100,000. And what's interesting is that for almost all income bands, there were people who chose a different dollar amount, which goes to show that your income is a reasonable predictor, but maybe not a very good predictor. More useful, however, for every income band, there is a mode. So if you earn less than 50,000, chances are you will think that a bill that is $20 to $30 more than what you're used to will constitute a high bill. That amount goes up to $40 to $50 more for the next income band. And then if you earn more than 100,000, that's typically if the bill is more than about $100. And should also say that $100, interestingly, is a bit of a all-purpose trigger, as absolutely everybody will report that probably constitutes a high bill. And that makes sense if you think of how people process numbers. And to reinforce that point, we looked at the same information in terms of percentages. And again, what we found is that the percentage does in fact steadily increase with people's income. So for somebody earning 50,000 and under, the threshold is at about 20% of $124, whereas for a higher earner, that threshold goes up to about 60% of an average bill of about $158. And so again, the lesson here is that deciding what's a hard bill is remarkably subjective, and that you'd want to be prepared with giving people lots of options in terms of how they think of this. And that's a good option to take a quick look at how a low-income customer might experience bills. So to do this, we did in-home interviews. with 15 low-income customers to find out their experience. And here we found a couple of not very intuitive findings. For one thing, we found that utility bills were not a priority for these customers. With food, rent, loans, all of these things have much, much higher urgency. A utility bill was lower down the list. And if anything, people thought of power consumption as contributing a little bit to daily comfort that they would not otherwise have. Second, we found that, in general, these lower-income customers don't look to their utility as a source of help. They are far more likely to go to church groups, the Salvation Army, various nonprofits. They look to the community first and not to their utility. And then third, and this one makes a bit more sense, but budgeting is done on a much, much shorter time frame. This really is more about managing week-to-week, month-to-month expenditures rather than thinking about the spend on the longer term. And for us, this told us that there's a huge opportunity to provide a more insightful billing experience to these customers in particular, and that they would be looking for different information than what most customers would be looking for. Still on the bill, we wanted to get a sense of what do customers attribute high bills to? What's the root cause of why somebody might have a high bill? And here we found that people think of this in 3 different groups. So first, there are a couple of things that they would say are essentially out of their control. So first comes extremely hot or cold weather, then it's new fees and charges, and then it's rate increases. These 3 items were the top reasons why somebody thought that they'd be getting a high bill. And the psychologists here, this is a common thing, and it's called the fundamental attribution error, where you think of something not due to something you have done, but due to external factors. And much the same seems to be happening with utility bills. The behavioral one, forgetting to turn off lights, appliances, etc., doesn't come up until 4th. Same with lifestyle changes, such as having a new work schedule or a new household member. People are far less likely to think that these are at the root cause. And again, it makes a major difference in terms of how you think about the other information you give a customer. And it tells you how they will prioritize the information. So first, they want to know, was there something external that caused this high bill? And only then is your average consumer likely to want information on how they might have contributed to a higher bill. And so a little bit there on how consumers as a group evaluate their bills. Third, we want to look at, so what do customers do after receiving a high bill? What happens? And so maybe not a big surprise, but a good half of them, 47% of them, will call the utility once they receive a high bill. A smaller number, 30% there, go to the website. And as I think you can agree, this is not necessarily the outcome we'd want. And we see this in call center data from across utilities, where billing-related questions in general cause the most calls to the call center, 42% of them. And for the most part, people are looking for either explanation of a bill, or curious how about something came about, or looking for payment information, or simply want to complain, thinking that there's something the utility can do about it. Also worth noting that low-income customers are almost twice as likely to call over a 3-month span. So there's definitely an income effect, if not necessarily in terms of how they receive the bill, but in terms of the actions that result. And you see this, and you see this at work when we look at when exactly call centers receive call. So here it's a somewhat complicated graph from our analytics group, where we're looking at the probability of calling based on the billing period. The y-axis there is the probability, the horizontal axis there is numbers a day from the billing period. And here's something that I'm sure you're all acutely aware of. Bills land day 1 or 2, and calls start going up. And then there's a definite spike there in that first week as people have lots of questions. Afterwards, it's flat, and then it goes up again as the bill comes due. And I imagine that's some people calling in frantically to make payments, or realizing that they now have to do something because it's becoming overdue. So from a call center perspective, a very consolidated period of work. One interesting thing is we wanted to do some follow-up with customers for them to rate the quality of the assistance they receive compared to, did they receive assistance when they called versus the web? And here we see what we think is something of a myth. 70% of people who call the utility report not receiving assistance from the website. And we think this too presents considerable opportunity to more carefully address some of the things that your average customer is looking for when they call the utility call center, so that they could self-serve rather than necessarily call up the utility. And here again, there are many other companies who've made it very easy for customers and members to find information on the web. Here we thought we'd call out USAA in particular. For a long time, they've been investing a lot of money in self-service, enabling their customers to complete virtually all transactions online. And consequently, they also have some of the highest NPS scores in the country. And these are the kinds of insights and findings we've been leveraging. To summarize that research, what we found is that the bill is indeed a very salient experience. It's something almost everybody opens, but relatively few people take much from the experience. And because it's a bit of an unedited experience, it's very likely to lead to bill shock, which results in customer dissatisfaction and calls to the call center. And so the question was, what do we do with this information? How can we use it to make for a better customer experience? And this is where I want to transition over to my colleague Michael.
Yeah, thanks so much, Timur. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So Timur asked a very good question here. And I first just want to reiterate what he said, which is that billing is one of the most important experiences that the customer has with the utility. It happens very frequently, 12 times a year in many cases. And it's definitely one of those times when the customer is looking to the utility for advice and insights. And as you've seen through Timur's research, there are a number of unexpected challenges and problems that kind of rear their head along the way. So again, to Timur's question, what can we as an industry do about this challenge? So as an industry, I would postulate that we often are too quick to design experiences for customers, for the end users, without actually stepping into their shoes. And Timur, I think where your research has been really helpful is that it really grounds us in the customer experience. What do customers experience at arrival, at assessment, at action, from before the bill is even generated to all the way after when it has arrived and when the customer is taking some action based on that arrival. And so for the next few minutes, I want to share some really exciting stuff that we're doing with our utility partners at Opower to put in place best practices around this billing experience to develop tools and solutions that not only overcome these challenges, but that along the way kind of really boost and increase customer satisfaction and then also lower costs to the utility. So let's dive in. So the first challenge that Timur talked about is a really, really important one, and it's that high bill shock. again, to reiterate what Timur said, 40% of customers report receiving a high bill in the last 12 months. 75% almost are surprised by that bill, and it gives them some anxiety. So how do we solve for that problem? We at Opower have been working with over a dozen different utilities to send high bill alerts to millions of customers. And what's great about these alerts, which you can see here on this slide, is that they let customers know ahead of time when they're on track for a high bill, and they let customers know what they can do to control that and get ahead of it. So it isn't a surprise, so there isn't high bill shock. And you know, what's beautiful about preventing high bill shock is that it also prevents calls into the call center. It gives customers a greater sense of control, and from that comes greater customer satisfaction. So on the left, I would point out that this is an example of an AMI communication. Where we have AMI data, you can imagine we have some really great analytics that allows us to very accurately project out in the middle of the bill period kind of how much their bill will be for that month. We've put a lot of effort in user testing, kind of getting in there, talking to customers, understanding what they like and don't like about these communications. Then we've also been looking at the data, learning from the millions of high bill alerts that we've sent. And we know that this is working. At Mercury Energy is just one example. They're seeing 19% call volume reduction from billing-related calls, which is quite impressive, and it definitely has impact on the bottom line. On the right, you can see a new version of the high bill alert that we are rolling out at Opower that we're very excited about that actually does not require AMI data. And we can still use this alert to give customers a heads up that don't have smart meters, whether or not they're on track for a high bill. So how do we do this? Well, we use monthly data and weather data. We run a regression. And from that regression and that data set, we can determine how each individual household's sensitivity to changes in the weather. And from that, we are able to predict who is on track for a high bill, and from that, we can then alert them. So what's beautiful about these communications is it allows us to cover all utility customers, no matter whether they have smart meters or not. And it allows these customers to have a sense of control leading up to that bill arrival moment. So, the bill arrival moment. I think many of us, and I would imagine many of us joining on the call today would agree that this is, of that billing journey, the most important one. You know, again, 79% of customers, as Timur mentioned, read the utility bill every single time it arrives. And most of these bills, whether they're paper or electronic, are not always very user-friendly. And you know, how customers interpret this sometimes complex information is very idiosyncratic. It varies from person to person to person. The amazing thing today is, though, that most customers get the same type of e-bill or bill. In the case of an e-bill notification, oftentimes it's a few lines of text. It's a link to go pay. And really they lack that personal touch, which is so incredibly important, as the research has borne out. So at Opower, we've set our sights on developing a new personal e-bill notification. And you can see that here on this slide. And let me walk you through kind of how this works, because it is pretty cool. So there's two use cases that we're designing for. The top half does what every e-bill does today. And this is the first use case. It's for customers that want to pay their bill and move on with their lives. We featured the bill amount and a link to pay, and from there the customer can go and you know, complete their business through whatever site or system that utility has in place. But of course, you know, most customers, and especially those that have a high bill, they want to know more. That's just, you know, the top part is not enough. So we need to give them some insight into their bill. And this is where personalized insights are so important. And you can see that front and center right in the middle there with the personalized usage disaggregation. So this is unique to each customer that receives this. It's unique to each customer's bill. And again, it's based on a proprietary analysis that we have that determines household sensitivity to weather patterns. It gives customers context, and it provides them a sense of what is the biggest driver of usage in their personal home or apartment. So the rest of the communication. We also want to take advantage of the fact that customers are really paying attention at this time, and we want to take advantage of it working with our utility partners to promote products, programs, and services that are really valuable to them. So this is the perfect moment to do it. You will see in this communication there is a marketing module. It is embedded in the communication very seamlessly. It doesn't look like most advertisements or most marketing modules that you see out there today. It feels like another personalized insight and a natural part of the email. The beauty of this very flexible space is that it can be segmented every which way by demographics, housing characteristics, rate plans, load profiles, really anything that you can imagine. So this is a very powerful place to get your message across and get customers onto programs, whether it's auto pay, e-billing, low-income assistance, et cetera. And then finally, there's an opportunity at the bottom there to ask customers for feedback. What an amazing concept. Asking customers how they feel about the communication. Not only does it allow us to measure customer satisfaction in real time, but it makes customers feel like their opinions matter. It makes them feel better about the overall services being provided by the utility. So this is a new great communication that we're rolling out and actually have rolled out at Puget Sound Energy. We'll be rolling this out to others over the coming months. And we think it adds much needed personalization to the bill arrival moment, and ultimately it will lead to more satisfied customers. So the next conclusion that we took from Timur's research is that, and as you move down that billing experience, is that customers want to really be able to dig in to their information, understand kind of what is going on with their bill. The proactive alerts are nice, and they provide the most important information at the right time, but there's always going to be a subset of customers that want to dive in a little bit deeper. And so we've developed and designed an Opower web experience that truly is a digital extension of those outbound communications that we've just walked through. This is a place where customers can explore more in-depth insights, and they can take some actions in a way that is truly continuous from the other experiences that they're getting from the utility. So what you can see, let me just go back one second. There we go. What you can see here is a common page that we often direct customers to from our e-bill notification that we'd be sending. It allows customers to understand different factors that are impacting their bill. Example would be kind of, is there a change in the bill period? Is there weather at play that is driving usage? With this information at the customer's fingertips, we've seen results showing that customers are much less likely to call into the call center because they're able to self-serve and find this information on their own. Okay, the final step in the billing experience is that there are always going to be a subset of customers who want to talk to a human being. They want to call into the call center. And so we at Opower believe it is absolutely essential that we are arming call center representatives, contact center representatives with these same personalized insights to field these really tricky calls. To do that, we've developed a tool that we call Billing Advisor. You can see here that it's designed specifically for these call center reps to provide more insight during these especially tricky calls in a way that is very simple, in a simple format, and in a way that doesn't add to the total time to service a customer, average handle time, et cetera. So let me quickly walk you through how we've designed this. And again, we've rolled this out a few times with our partners, and we've been receiving some great feedback. So at the top, there is, right away the customer service rep is given the relevant insight for the particular customer that is called in as to why their bill is high. And just an example, as the winter months are rolling in, the rep is able to see and explain the impact of weather on the customer's bill. They can then dive in even deeper. They can drill into specific days and times during the day, if the data allows, to really diagnose why the customer's bill is high. And provide that information really quickly in a way that makes sense and is intuitive for the end user. What's beautiful about this tool is it pulls from data across multiple systems at the utility. So the MDMS, the CIS, third-party sources like weather information. We're able to combine that and provide a complete picture of the customer situation and offer that up to the representative so it's easy for them to give these insights. The final piece of this tool is just the ability for the rep to provide some preventative medicine. So you can see in the top right and the right side of the screen here that there is the opportunity for the rep to walk the customer through an audit, provide an insight in terms of what uses most in the home, collect some information, input from the end customer. An example of that might be that the rep would learn that, again, it's a winter months example, the customer is actually using an inefficient space heater. And so the rep could provide a relevant tip or program promotion that is beneficial to both the utility and the end user. And then finally, the tool has the ability to sign customers up for alerts, which is great because it is one way that we can keep these customers from calling into the call center going forward, because they're then alerted to the fact that these high bills are coming. But then second is the utility is able to provide something of value in return for asking for a customer's email address. It's not just asking for the sake of asking. There's something there at the other end, which we know from behavioral science that the notion of reciprocity is a very powerful one. So in summary, that from top to bottom, this tool is designed to match the flow of a typical high bill call. It provides personalized insights that make it easier for the representative, but then more insightful for the customer that is calling in. So we think it's the combination of all of these experiences and products that makes this billing journey a great one. And it really does kind of start with understanding the challenges from the end user's perspective from the beginning. Timur talked earlier about how there are rising customer expectations. And we think this is definitely the case here with the billing experience for utility customers. Customers expect the same level of service as Verizon, as Amazon, as USAA, all these examples that we provided today. And I think what you can see here that we're rolling this out with Puget Sound Energy. They're our first partner in doing all of these components of and making a better billing experience. I think Jason would agree that there are some great cost savings, there are some great customer satisfaction benefits that come with this experience. But I think one thing, a personal anecdote that stood out to me was that in talking to Jason, he said that Puget is headquartered in the same town in Seattle as Amazon and Nordstrom's. That's where their headquarters are. And I think just as much as he's excited about the cost savings and the awareness he will get from these products and this experience rolled out to their customers, he's just as excited about Puget elevating their customer service game to the same level as Amazon and Nordstrom. And so we are very excited to be working with him to provide this experience to his customers and Puget's customers. So with that, I want to thank everyone very much for your time and attention. I want to thank CS Week for welcoming us to do this webinar. I want to thank Timur for joining me in presenting. And I would just say that you have our email addresses here, and certainly reach out to us. All of this research that we walked through and even more is available as a complimentary white paper that we can send to you. So by all means, reach out to us, and thank you once again for your time and attention. And I think with that, we are now going to, I'm going to turn it over to Roxanne. We're going to take questions from the audience.
Thanks, Michael, and thank you, CS Week, for allowing us this opportunity to speak to you today. We're going to start to answer some questions that you can submit yourself through the Q&A panel on the attendee panel that you should see on your screen. We're just going to go through the questions as they come in. So we're going to start with some questions that we've already received from the audience. The first one from Josh. The question is, do you have any research on how people like to receive their bill, online or paper? And that's for Timur.
Sure. That's a really interesting topic. It's one of these things where there's a bit of a say-do gap. So the future is definitely digital. So when we've looked at it, 74–80% of people say that they would actually prefer to receive their bills digitally. But interestingly, for the moment, almost half, 47% of them, are still choosing to receive it on paper, even though they often have the option of receiving it electronically. We think that will change over time. Like paper will, especially younger people in general, are less interested in receiving mail. That said, I think it's fair to say that there's a group of people who use the paper bill as a bit of a sort of a budgeting tool and a bit of a reminder for themselves. And so I think it's unlikely that it will ever entirely go away.
Great. All right, and I'm just going to go through another question that we received during the presentation from Sarah, and this one's for Michael. We have a challenge with moving customers to digital channels and paperless billing. How can the tools you've shown help with that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the general question of kind of moving customers that aren't currently digitally engaged to a place where they are is a really important one. It's also a challenge that I think that many utilities face today. I'm just thinking there was a study from Accenture that I read recently that, and I believe the stat was that only 44% of customers are currently engaged with their utility in some form, which, that leaves a whole chunk of customers that there's still a ways to go. And I think we can also all agree that there's a huge benefit to pushing customers down this path towards digital engagement. If you think about just the simple act of moving customers from a paper bill to an electronic bill, the paper cost alone is around $1 per bill, and so there can be some real lifetime savings that are directly go to the utility, upwards of $50 per household. In terms of savings there, that's very real, but I think also just moving customers to digital channels and engagement, they're more likely to participate in programs. They're also just more likely to be satisfied with the service that the utility is providing. So with that as background, the answer to the question of, how can we use these tools to move customers to that end state, I think there's a few ways we can do it. One that we've seen is very powerful is using the call center as an avenue to collect email addresses. And so, one way we could do that, as I mentioned, is to offer something in return in the form of alerts. One other thing that we've seen is offering points and rewards, little prizes for customers that do some one-time action, such as give their email. So I think there's a lot you can do through the call center. I would also just say that, across all of these different communications that I've shown and talked about, having a good platform that allows you to do segmentation and targeting of those communications by a whole host of different demographic, psychographic, behavioral attributes and factors, I think that is a huge, can be a huge boost to getting customers on programs, products, and services. So I think if you're thinking about how do you get customers on e-bill, auto payment, assistance plans, budget billing, I think it's getting the right message to the right customer at the right time, and that requires a bit of having a personalized touch on all the different channels that you're interacting with the customer on today.
All right, we have another question, this one from Eric, and I'm going to let Timur take this. Eric asks, more than 75% of our customers are not e-bill customers. What recommendations do you have for the paper bill?
Thanks, Eric. I think the research got to some of the potential answers, which is the salience of the communication. As I alluded to, people essentially take away one or two things from the communication. What's the amount, when it's due, and our initial internal research suggests maybe there's room to communicate one other thing to them, and in particular we suggest that follows the sort of natural way in which people are going to think about the journey. So first they want to know, is there some external reason why the bill is what it is? So did something change? Was it hot or cold? Was there some change in the rates or the tariff or something else? And then once that objection has been dispensed with, then maybe there's opportunity to tell them about something else. That could be about a program, that could be about a different kind of offer. Where I think it gets really complicated is that if you ask consumers if they would want more information on X, Y, Z, they will almost certainly say yes. And I suspect that a lot of the current billing structure comes from the experience of having asked people and then literally followed that. And so your average bill has at least a dozen, if not more, items of information on it. And so here, what I think, and I'm the researcher, I can propose this. What we propose a little bit is showing people that granular research, which is that there's a real trade-off between sort of comprehension and literacy and the number of things you communicate at a time. So that's a conversation we've been having with both utilities, but also other people who are involved in that, such as regulators, commissions, interveners, those kinds of populations.
Great, and we also had an additional question come in from Eric. Eric asks, how do you reconcile a clean design that communicates amount due and due date in a clear way with the regulatory constraints that may require many line items and confusing terminology, all on the customer's bill?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one is making sure that you have the flexibility within these communications to accommodate whatever regulatory constraints there may be. I think that's, I think you raise a really good point here. You want to, be able to balance those two considerations. I think what we're finding in working with, a variety of different utilities on this is that there is less regulation around, the types of communication insights that, you can put on an e-bill notification, especially as compared to the paper bill itself. So that we think that the, electronic delivery of billing communications is one of those areas where there is a lot of room for us to embed a lot of these insights, this clean design that you talk about. But that said, I think how that varies from a regulatory perspective is kind of, it depends on the state, it depends on the environment that you're working in. So I would just say that I think our perspective is there is a lot of opportunity here, and then it will just, be a one-on-one discussion with your regulators as well. That's the call center tool.
All right.
Sorry, we're just waiting for the next round of questions to come in.
Yeah, we just got one in actually from the audience. It looks like Stephanie sent this one in. This one is directed at Timur. Timur, from your research, do people want more information presented on the actual bill?
As I was touching on that a little bit, if you ask them, they will say they do, but I can also assure you that once you then do a deep dive with them, they will not recollect much of it. So that's the kind of thing where I think the user-focused design becomes extra important.
All right, we had one more question come in. This one is from Neil, and specifically for Michael. Michael, how does the Opower call center tool work with customer information systems and other tools in the contact center?
Yeah, Neil, that's a really great question. We've designed this tool specifically to make sure it works. It's a friendly tool and seamlessly kind of integrates across all the different call center technologies that are in place today. So, whether it's an Oracle system, SAP system, whatever the case may be, we're able to work nicely with all those different call center systems, no matter which one is in place. And there's really just a simple integration that we do on top of those systems. And what we've seen kind of in call centers, we've spent quite a bit of time shadowing reps and talking to folks that lead call centers. Call center representatives are excellent multitaskers. They're accustomed to pulling information from a lot of different systems, whether it's the CIS, the MDMS, OMS. They go to weather.com. And so one thing we heard loud and clear from them is, having kind of a single screen that allows them to pull information from all these different sources in a really quick way is very powerful. And so we wanted to make sure we're designing a tool that is flexible in that sense, and that we can integrate with a lot of different systems, run the analytics, and present that information in a way to the reps so that they can have constructive conversations with their customers.
All right, we had a question come in from Rick. This one is for Timur. Timur, about alerts, don't people mind these kinds of reminders?
So, thank you for that. So far, I would say the evidence is no, actually. When we send these to people on an opt-out basis, opt-out for that remains low. And I think it's important to differentiate between these kinds of proactive messages and marketing messages. I think it's fair to say that if they were marketing messages, they were sort of a non-customized offer, then you'd be looking at the kind of opt-outs that you typically see with direct marketing. But for these kinds of alerts, especially if they're configurable and somebody gets to play around a little bit to figure out what makes sense with their lifestyle, then no. The opt-out rate for these is remarkably low.
All right, it looks like we are just about reaching the end of the hour, so I want to be mindful of folks' times, as I know you've probably allotted just the 1 hour for this webinar. If you do have any questions, either we didn't get to yours or it comes up and comes to you later on, please feel free to reach out to Michael or Timur. We've provided their email addresses here in the presentation, or you can reach out to your CS Week moderators who'd be happy to pass along any questions to the presenters today. And we really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Timur, Michael, Roxanne. One quick note that we would like to share with the attendees is the awards submissions are open for our Expanding Excellence Awards program. The deadline is January 4th, and any utility submitting an award entry will receive 50% discount on up to 5 Conference 40 registrations. And so we hope you visit our website, and please do consider submitting your projects. And at this time, again, I'd like to thank Timur and Michael. It was a very informational and just a delightful presentation, and we enjoyed it. And so at this time, I would just like to say that this will conclude our webinar. Thank you for attending.